Today on the Ten12 podcast, we are welcoming Andy Mitz, Melissa Triebwasser, Justin Williams, and Chase A. Kiddy to the show to recap everything that went down in Week 6 for the Big 12. That includes a deep dive on this Cincinnati team and that fantastic offensive line, what the results of the weekend mean for the Big 12 title race moving forward, teams we're buying stock on, teams we're selling stock on, and a whole lot more, all coming up on the 10-12 Big Show.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like expecting the leadership of a team captain on the football field, but getting a sea captain. You wouldn't settle for just anything for your team. Shouldn't it be the same for your insurance? So don't settle for just any insurance when you can go with a leader. State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Welcome to the 10-12 Big Show, where every Sunday night we recap the weekend of Big 12 action with a variety of guests. This week that includes Melissa Triebwasser, Justin Williams, Andy Mitz, and Chase A. Kiddy. 10-12 podcast is the flagship show of the 10-12 network. Find every show on the network at 1012network.com. That's TEN, the number 12, the word network. Of course, we are partners with Sports Social, Europe's biggest sports podcast network. I'm your host, Phillip Slavin. Thank you for joining us as we are here every Monday. Wherever you are listening, please do us a favor. Leave 5 stars and a review. It's a few seconds for you, but it's a huge thing for us. Very, very beneficial. If you're watching or listening on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe. Leave a comment. I try and check those as regularly as possible, and we'll respond, assuming that it's not something, just mean-spirited. Help us reach new Big 12 fans looking for Big 12 content. Share the news. Let everybody know about the 10-12. We would appreciate it. Just because we've been around a while doesn't mean that everyone knows who we are. As we say, every podcast is, fingers crossed, hopefully somebody's first. Our first segment, as it is every Monday, we go into the rotation. Joining us this week is longtime 10-12 co-host, host of the Rock Chalk podcast, our Kansas show here in the 10-12 network. He is the man Kansas State fans love to hate, Andy Mitz.
Yeah, it's great. We actually had football this weekend, unlike last weekend.
I don't...
Ha. Ha, ha.
Oh.
No, I know.
Listen, we don't have to make basketball season
I don't want to talk about
jokes
Cincinnati
anymore, so...
No, I know, but I don't think I don't want to talk about Cincinnati, just like I don't think Iowa State fans want to talk about Cincinnati today. So,
well, we will
about Cincinnati, but at least for
we
the next
will. But
few
I'm
weeks.
saying, yeah, exactly.
Okay, that other voice you hear, one-time 10-12 TCU show host, all-time friend of the pod, co-host of the Frogs Insider podcast, and the woman we would bring back in a heartbeat if we were allowed to have as a host of a TCU podcast show. That is Melissa Triebwasser.
Hello. And I'm not afraid of Cincinnati because I don't have to be until after Thanksgiving.
I didn't say I was afraid of them. I just said I didn't want to talk about them.
I will be afraid of them leading up into that game, for sure.
No, that's fair. As you probably should be. And I should have been a few weeks ago. So,
well,
I think we may have lost Phillip.
No. I had to turn off the camera because sometimes I leave my camera on. It creates a lag. And so if I notice a lag, which I did, I'll turn off the camera. You guys don't need to see me. I mean, not that anyone out there listening
he's going to be that disembodied voice in our heads.
Perfect. Good. As we enjoy.
Yes.
It is spooky season.
This is Halloween. All right. Let's just run through some things real quick here to start things off. Very interesting weekend in the Big 12. Some absolutely wild games. On Saturday, Baylor walks off Kansas State on a 53-yard field goal in a game that saw 7 lead changes and 2 ties. I don't think anyone walked away from that game feeling like winners. Iowa State almost comes back from down 24 points against Cincinnati, but is not quite able to do so. Kansas does come back from down 14-0 and stops UCF on the goal line, not 1, not 2, but 3 times, as well as another turnover on downs on their own 22nd to be able to snatch victory away from the jaws of defeat in Orlando. And of course, TCU plays a tight game that looks better with the final score against Colorado, but a win is a win is a win. That's just a few of the games we saw this weekend. We had some blowouts. We had some less competitive games, but I got to ask each of you, and Andy, I'll let you go first. What is the result from this weekend, be it one of those games we mentioned or a different one entirely, that stood out to you the most?
I'm not going to go ahead and say Kansas UCF, although I do think that could have some implications. I think for me, the biggest one is actually that BYU West Virginia game on Friday. I have been skeptical of BYU, I think, all year long, thinking that they're kind of just benefiting from people not knowing what to expect from them. But this 5-0 and now 2-0 in the Big 12. Yes, it hasn't come against the best teams in the Big 12, but I've seen enough from them to think that they have the pieces to put it all together, much like Cincinnati has been proving me wrong since, that opening week loss to Nebraska. So I do think that this win for BYU, yes, it was against a West Virginia team that is struggling this year, but I saw enough there for me to think that BYU is a legitimate contender in the conference race this year.
Interesting. On that note, PFSN College put out their updated odd to win the Big 12. They have BYU third at 15.2%. So they also see BYU's in this race. I still have some questions about them, but I think it's a good point to make. Melissa, what red outcome this weekend really stood out to you?
I mean, I think the BYU game is definitely interesting. I think West Virginia is just really, really, really bad, like maybe UNC level bad. But you can't hate on BYU because they just keep winning. And Bear Backmeyer might not be a perfect QB, but he's a hell of a gamer. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely up there. But at the end of the day, to me, the most shocking result is what Cincinnati did to Iowa State, not just in beating them, but the way that they beat them. This conference has been, everyone's going to talk about how even it is and how many good teams there are. And half the league is, in the top 30 right now of the AP poll, ostensibly. But it's been really hard to determine who's actually like good, who could go in and win a playoff game. I think Texas Tech has kind of separated itself almost by default, but Iowa State looked like that other team that was a front runner. And for Cincinnati to come in and really just beat them up and out physical them, especially an Iowa State team that, Matt Campbell's done such a good job of being physical in Ames. That was shocking to me, and it definitely makes me look at Cincinnati differently. I think you have to put a little respect on the Bearcats' name and Brennan Sorsby's name here based on the way that we've seen them win. And, they're really just one kind of terrible decision away from being undefeated and potentially having arguably the best resume in the conference and potentially like a top 15 resume in the country.
The one thing I will say in Iowa State's defense here, and not to take away from what Cincinnati's done, but I do think that the fact that they lost both of their cornerbacks,
for sure,
in that week, you could tell, like they actually talked about it on the broadcast, Iowa State sold out with their safeties to help those cornerback replacements, and Cincinnati just didn't bite on it at all. They kept with the run. When Iowa State shifted back to, protecting against the run in the second half, they played a lot better in that game. That being said, I still think that what Cincinnati was able to do was very, very impressive. I don't think Iowa State's quite as done as a lot of doom and gloom Iowa State fans have been saying. I still think Iowa State is clearly in the race here. It's just a matter of, like, to your point, I think Cincinnati has been super impressive and deserves to be in the conversation for that potential top spot in the conference.
We all know one loss in conference play does not doom you from reaching Arlington. It was shocking to see, and I think, Andy, your point on Iowa State coming out with a game plan that didn't work and then adjusting, they just adjusted too late because at that point the offense was struggling. Now, look, Iowa State had their chances late but couldn't quite overcome some mistakes, and Cincinnati had a huge play to be able to push that lead back up to double digits, and Iowa State just couldn't overcome all of that. We'll talk about the Cincinnati side a little bit more with Justin Williams later on the show. But as for Iowa State, it's so interesting to see to see Iowa State's defense kind of be that wrong, to make a call that wrong in how they schemed for Cincinnati. And I credit to Brendan Sorsby, because we said after week one, I blamed the loss to Nebraska on the coaching staff. I thought it was a coaching decision way more than it was a fault of Brendan Sorsby got put in a bad spot to throw an interception. That's not what they should have done. You can blame who you want. I blame coaching. Brendan Sorsby has been, and we'll talk more about him later too. Like, I'm not going to say he's some like capital G good quarterback, but I have yet to sell my stock on Brendan Sorsby. I'm going to keep hanging on to it because he is at least a good quarterback in the Big 12 and good enough this year to take this Cincinnati team all the way to Arlington. And if they, I mean, look, it's not insane to say is this year's Arizona State, the team that nobody really bought into. I loved the roster. We said that before the season. I just don't like the coaching staff. And I don't know if the coaching staff's continuing to get better or they're just overcoming it because they've got an incredible offensive line who's giving a good quarterback time to be better and better. Again, I want from the Iowa State side of this, though, like I have no doubt they can bounce back from this. They do have a tough schedule, but I have zero doubt they can bounce back. It's so unusual. I think this is why I have faith in Iowa State. To see an Iowa State, a John Heacock-led defense, struggle like that early in a game. They figured it out how to adjust, but to be so wrong on their call of how to defend Cincinnati.
Well, I think I kind of want to just touch on what you said a little bit earlier. Yeah, Iowa State had a lot go wrong and had some injury issues and stuff, but Cincinnati just kept doing the right thing. And Brendan Sorsby consistently makes good choices behind arguably the best offensive line in the conference. And they have, one of the elite defensive lines in the conference too. For Iowa State, I mean, I think that when you lose really important players on one side of the football, you tend to overthink how to play. And it seems like they overcompensated instead of just trusting their developmental process. Iowa State, I mean, you say they have a tough schedule, but their toughest remaining road game is at TCU. And, we can get into that, but I don't think anybody's afraid to come play TCU right now with their issues protecting the quarterback and running the football. Otherwise, I mean, they get BYU at home, they get Arizona State at home, they get Kansas at home, and then they finish at Oklahoma State. And I don't think anybody's scared of that whatsoever at this point.
No.
I still, I'm more worried about Rocco Beck and his health. He took some bad hits, and after at least one of them, I was shocked to see him go back on the field. They are not going to be able to allow that kind of physicality against their quarterback to continue if they want to be a contender. BYU, Cincinnati, Arizona State, are probably, and Iowa State are probably the four vying to face off with Texas Tech right now, or have at least the best path to get there. But if they can't keep Rocco upright, it's not going to matter.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think that Sorsby should be, or is probably the best candidate from the Big 12 for the Heisman. Just the way he's already had multiple moments that you can point to as kind of his quote unquote Heisman drive moments. And yes, he had, everybody loves a good story about overcoming adversity. So for him to have such a big issue in that first game, with that game losing interception, and then to play so well now in the last few weeks, I think he's still very much a dark horse, in that conversation. But I think if you're looking for a candidate from the Big 12, I think Sorsby's the best one we have.
Well, I think Baron Morton is going to, because he's going to put up just stupid numbers, and Texas Tech isn't going to lose a game in the regular season. If he's healthy, which is the big question for him.
Right. I'm also operating the assumption, because I've yet to see Texas Tech finish a season with the same quarterback they started with in the last, 10 years. So I'm not assuming that Baron Morton is going to be there at the end of the year, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think it's a great way to transition to Texas Tech.
The biggest surprise. That might be the biggest surprise of the season if Baron Morton finishes the season out at Texas Tech.
Yeah, no, look, anytime a Texas Tech quarterback plays a whole season, that is something to talk about.
We're celebrating.
Let's transition to Texas Tech, who's now outscored opponents 189-14 in the first three quarters of the season. Go look at the scores that they've given up to opponents and realize that majority of those points have come in the fourth quarter of games when they are out of reach. 14 points in the first three quarters total so far. Again, we can sit here and nitpick who they've played, and in non-conference, that's absolutely valid. But now you've gone on the road to Utah and you've gone on the road to Houston in back-to-back games. And look, I'm not going to say either performance against Utah or Houston was perfect, but they didn't have to be. The offense has not been, I think, perfect against quality competition on the road so far. I feel like they left a lot on the field against Houston, but it didn't matter the way that defense has been playing. Like, it has been phenomenal and all over the place. Entering the game 2 weeks ago against Utah, Utah was ranked 11th in the country in total defense, giving up just 224 yards a game. Texas Tech put up 484 yards on the road. Entering Saturday, Houston is ranked 16th in the nation in total defense, giving up 265 yards per game. Texas Tech put up 552 yards on them on the road. They only scored 35 points. They only scored 34 against Utah. So again, I look at the yardage and say they're putting up offense. They're leaving points on the field. That might come back to bite them later. I don't know. But so far, the offense is just humming along against two really good defenses the last 2 weeks. And so the question of, do we need to be concerned based off the quality of non-conference opponent? So far, no, because the last two teams they played, I think, are really good defensively, and Texas Tech has had no problem putting up yards against them, and the defense just continues to. Please tell me, either of you, the last time we could say, wow, that is a really good Texas Tech defense.
Well, they bought it. It better be.
I don't care. I don't care.
They
went
in. No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, they went all in this year, knowing they have an incredibly soft schedule. I think the Big 12 has been, I don't think it's unfair to say, a little disappointing with the quarterback play we've seen compared to what we thought we would see going into this year. It hasn't been bad, but I don't think there's a quarterback, you talk about, looking at Brennan Sorsby as the most likely to be a Heisman candidate. That doesn't exactly scream this conference is living up to its preseason billing as being potentially the best. They're all good. This is a conference full of good teams, and there's not elite teams. So when you go and drop $40 million on a roster and buy an elite team, you get to be the elite team. They invested wisely. They built up the offense and the defensive lines. Like, yeah, I mean, it's going to suck for the rest of us. It's not fun. But for them, they did what they needed to do. Cody Campbell said, I want a Big 12 championship and I want to make a run to a national championship. And I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think that they're going to coast to Arlington. Maybe Arizona State can get them. Maybe. Like, that's the one game on their schedule I look at and go, that might be tougher than they anticipate. But I mean, having just watched that team, beat TCU, and they're just going to try to muck it up and make it ugly. And I think the difference between Texas Tech today and Texas Tech of the last several years is they can win an ugly game. If it's going to be a 17-13 game, Tech can win that game now. That has not historically been true. So yeah, I mean, they don't have a lot of weaknesses except for their coaching staff. At the end of the day, if they get in a one-score game late, do we trust Joey McGuire to be able to finish? And nobody has given them an opportunity to prove that he can't make those adjustments. So there's just not going to be a lot of tests on their schedule with the way things have looked so far. Kansas State looks competent again. I think that they're finally getting over their Ireland hangover, but those are Arizona State, Kansas State are the only two games that you look at and be like, this team can really test them. Maybe BYU, but that's in Lubbock. And at that point, they might have a lot to play for. I think that the talent is pretty much head and shoulders above the rest of the league. And as long as their coaching staff doesn't mess up the talent, then they should be able to buy this Big 12 championship. And you know what? Good for them. I think we all wish we had a Cody Campbell in our back pocket.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really comes down to, and I mean, Melissa kind of made the point that I was going to make, is that I don't think Texas Tech has shown plenty of areas where you can take advantage of them, but nobody's been able to do it consistently and for an entire game. And so I do think, and I think a big part of that is that nobody's been able to get offensive consistency against them, which is not something we're used to seeing for Texas Tech. And I mean, yes, I agree. It definitely feels like they've bought this, but in the world that we're in college football, like, that's how you win. That's how Alabama and, Georgia and Clemson have all been doing it for a long time. It's just now it's out in the open and we all know who's doing it.
And legal.
The one thing
unless you're Texas A&M, they've tried really, really hard and just haven't been able to do it. So
no, they're buying people. They're just buying the wrong people.
Yeah.
But I think really what it comes down to, I'm actually excited for this week. And I know that you guys will talk about it later. But this is the week that Kansas comes to town with Jalen Daniels, who is the highest rated quarterback in the Big 12 in terms of quarterback efficiency. I think Kansas has the offensive firepower to test that defense for the entire game. The question is going to be, can the Kansas defense stop them in any capacity at all? I think this is going to be a game, potentially, where we will get to look and see, hey, is this Texas Tech defense for real? And if it is for real, is the offense still high powered enough that they can continue to keep it up even when the defense is giving up a ton of points? Because I do think that's going to be a shootout game. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. And, you look at the way that Kansas played against UCF. I know we'll get to that here in just a minute, but the fact that, they stunk it up defensively in the first half when their probably best defensive player, Bengali Kamara, was out because of a bogus targeting penalty the week prior. They played phenomenally and shut UCF out in that second half against, when he was back in the game. So I'll be interested to see what Kansas defense can do against Texas Tech. I think this week is going to let us know whether Texas Tech is a long-term potential, CFP contender, or if they're just the best in the Big 12 and the Big 12 doesn't have an option this year.
One note, Melissa, on your comment about Joey and Coach McGuire in one-score games. Since the start of 2023, he is 9-4, including 6-1 last year in one-score games. So, look, I know that those kinds of things can ebb and flow, but, I mean, to his credit, pretty good so far the last 3 years at Texas Tech.
Also add, though, that I think a lot of his coaching decisions leading up to those one-score games put him in position to be in close games with teams.
Right. They went from a three-score. They went from a three-score, 42 to 20 win to instead of 42 to 35 win.
Yeah, and I don't think Texas Tech fans would disagree. I think that's the only thing that worries them about this season too is can Joey just stay out of his own way? So far, I mean, look, they've been great. Good. I hate it, but good for them. They're doing exactly what we expected them to do.
Yep. All right, let's run through the rest of the outcomes this weekend. Of course, Baylor, as we mentioned, beating Kansas State. That's one of those games where it doesn't give me any confidence in Baylor moving forward. I've lost count of how many weird won or lost in the fourth quarter games Coach Aranda has now had the past few seasons. As for Kansas State, Coach Kleiman's one-score record is now 5-10 the last 3 years. Kansas State's played in the most one-score games and is second worst at winning them. Not great there. Arizona, of course, smoked Oklahoma State. Cowboys are putting together what could end up being their worst season since World War II. I think with some of the stats and historical points they've had so far, that's a fair one to make. Only one FBS defense has yet to allow a passing touchdown this season, and that is Arizona. So that one is very interesting. Also, shout out, I watched all of that game, not because I'm some sort of masochistic Oklahoma State fan, but just because I wanted to watch the TNT coverage, which continues to be the best when it comes to the Big 12. Shout out Mike Golick Jr., doing a phenomenal job as the analyst in those games. BYU, of course, as we mentioned, beat West Virginia on Friday night in a game that West Virginia put up more points than I expected them to. TCU pulled away late against Colorado. That last touchdown, thank you for that one. For everyone who had TCU team total over or TCU covering, that was phenomenal.
And thank you,
so much.
Eric McAllister, not running me over in the end zone because he literally landed right where I had been sitting, and I got out of the way just in time, thankfully, with my camera.
Bravo.
Got a great shot, though. Got a great shot.
And, of course, Kansas had to come back, and then the defensive hold, and then hold, and then hold, and then hold, and then hold. And what feels like they're still getting goal line stands against UCF right now to pull that win off in Orlando. So let me ask you two to wrap up your segment, Andy and Melissa, of these other outcomes this weekend, which one do you think is going to be the most impactful on the season moving forward?
I mean, to me, it's the Baylor-Kansas State game because I think that's almost an elimination game. When you look at kind of that second tier of teams where I lump TCU, Baylor, Kansas State, Kansas will probably differentiate itself this weekend. Arizona, who's kind of a weird team this year. TCU goes to Kansas State this weekend. It still scares the crap out of me as a TCU person because we don't do well in Manhattan, but it feels like K-State is on the verge of giving up on Chris Kleiman in the season. And if they lose, I think that we're in for potentially some major changes in Manhattan, which has generally been known for stability. So that game to be, Baylor showed a little bit of fight. They fought for Dave Aranda's job a little bit, and Kansas State completely folded. I think we're really one loss away from that team being completely done this season and potentially not even making a bowl.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you look at the rest of Kansas State's schedule, and I don't know that they win more than two more of their games, or they're not going to be favored in any more than potentially two more of their games at Oklahoma State and potentially against Colorado at the end of the year. Like this is shaping up to potentially be a very bad season for Kansas State.
Yeah.
It seems like the Bill Snyder curse is coming back to strike again. You know, the coach that follows Bill. Like, is Bill Snyder going to come back for round 3 in Manhattan? it's just weird. The way that game ended makes me feel like this is going to be probably one of the worst years that the Wildcats fans have seen in a long, long time. I also do think that Kansas comeback against UCF is really going to kind of spur them on to see the way that they did it and what they're able to do. Obviously, the schedule is going to be fairly brutal for them from now on, but if they can grab a few, I think they have an opportunity to put themselves in a nice job in the bowl pecking order. But this week is the one that's really going to tell us if they're going to have an opportunity to potentially compete for a spot in Arlington. I wouldn't count on it at this point, but I do think that was absolutely critical, the comeback that they had against UCF. And those defensive stands, I think, was the most important, considering how they lost the week prior against Cincinnati, allowing Cincinnati to drive down with less than a minute left on the clock to win the game.
All right. Melissa, Andy, as always, it's an absolute pleasure to have you both. Everybody go check out the Rock Chalk podcast. Of course, Andy Mitch is the host of that show. It's our Kansas show here in the 1012 network. And of course, we don't have a TCU podcast, but if we did, Melissa would be our host again. But you can check out the Frogs Insider podcast, an absolutely incredible TCU show. Both of y'all, thanks so much, and we'll get you back in the rotation again later this season.
Thanks, Phillip.
Thanks.
No one should have to choose between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Purina is helping to create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters through the Purple Leash Project, so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
All right, move into segment 2 of the show. We're taking a deep dive. This week, we're going in on Cincinnati with the expert when it comes to Cincinnati. He is Justin Williams of The Athletic, back on the show after me bothering him for weeks and weeks to try and get him to do so. Justin, welcome back, man.
How you doing, Phillip? Always appreciate you having me on.
No, I always appreciate you hopping on, man. It's always funny when guests are like, "Thanks for having me on." I'm like, "No, you're doing me a favor. You're taking time out of your schedule to make sure I have content for a podcast that 500 people listen to." So I appreciate it, Justin, as always. Man, look, it's been an interesting start for the Cincinnati season, and then they go and do that on Saturday, and we can quibble over, John Heacock's defensive scheme to start the game and Cincinnati kind of taking advantage of it. But that might be out since Scott Satterfield took over. I think it's fair to say that is both the most impressive win and best performance I've seen from Cincinnati on the field since he was named the head coach. Is that me being is that hyperbole, or do you feel like that's a fair description of the game?
No, that's probably fair. Honestly, unfortunately for Cincinnati, the ones that stand out before that, they played really good at Texas Tech last year. They ended up losing, a close game late. And I feel like some of their better performances, the Nebraska game to start the year wasn't a good game, but they were right there and had a chance to come down at the end. So for this one, they're at home, which I realize should make it seem easier, but it's the highest ranked win they've had at home since 2006. Some of this team's biggest wins have been on the road. If you talk about the Notre Dame game, the year they went to the playoff under Luke Fickell. And so I think it was a big deal to have that game at home and get a win. And then, just, kind of the balanced performance, especially offensively, and pulling ahead. Yes, Iowa State made a little bit of a comeback, but I'm with you. I think where it was in the schedule, coming off that dramatic win at Kansas, not having a letdown, getting a big win against a ranked team, to me that was huge for Satterfield and really huge for the whole program.
Look, I said coming into the season, I loved this roster and did not like the coaching staff and felt like a different coaching staff would lead this team to way more success this year. I've not been a Scott Satterfield guy. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's fine. I'm happy to admit it. Part of it being, the last 2 years, they're 2-8 in 1-score games. 2-1 this year, small sample size, still to start to the year. You look at that Nebraska game, I lay the blame at the coaching staff's feet for making that call and putting Sorsby in that position, in that spot. But you look down the rest of the way, look, I know it's just 2 wins, but the fact that they've been able to do what they did against Kansas last week and Iowa State this week, I'm very impressed both with the performance and the play calling, but especially the performance of this team. It almost feels to me like I underrated how good the roster was based off my expectations for it. Do you think it is unfair to say the roster is overcompensating for coaching, or do you think that maybe they've just kind of got things finally flowing there with the staff and have figured some things out at Cincinnati?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say like who put the roster together? That's the coaching staff, and sure, the recruiting staff's part of that. But like, you got to give. I hear you, and I think that was a lot of criticism that people felt like this team wasn't playing to the talent that they had, even in that Nebraska game to start the year. But give Satterfield credit; he put this roster together. He's the head coach, and so I think you're starting to see all of it kind of come together. Now, let's get maybe a few more games and kind of see if they can keep it rolling. But I do feel like there are some things that they addressed from last year, wide receiver being a big one, secondary being another one, going getting Joe Cotton at left tackle. I think after this, like in the spring transfer portal, when there weren't a lot of guys and they kind of had to pay a premium for an FCS guy, but they know they needed someone at that tackle position. He's come in and been great. Actually, we should talk about their offensive line. That's kind of been one of the most impressive things for me. But, and if you look at when Scott Satterfield's teams, even going back to like when App State was in FCS, but when they've had the most success, they're running the ball 200 yards a game. And that's what they're doing right now. We can talk about Brendan Sorsby, who's been great, and these new receivers that they brought in, which have added a bounce to the offense. But the fact that they can run the ball consistently and make that offense have some balance, to me, that's exactly what Scott Satterfield wants to do in this offense, and it's working right now. And so I hear everything you're saying, but I think if you just look at the last 2 weeks, you got to give the coaching staff credit for putting this roster together, and then maybe also kind of figuring out the best way to use them all.
Those are all very valid points. Like I said, when I'm wrong, I'm happy to admit it. Opinion should always adjust with new information. Look, we have to talk about the offensive line. Second highest graded of the weekend. They have still only given up 1 sack all season. They did not give one up to Iowa State, which is impressive. Cincinnati is, of course, now still 100% in the red zone scoring. They came into the weekend that way, remain that way, 17 touchdowns and 21 red zone appearances. Otherwise, they've gotten field goals. And they're running the ball so well. Like, you're averaging 6.6 yards per carry. You averaged 8 yards per carry against Iowa State. It is a good defense that is typically stout against the run. This offensive line, it's the best in the Big 12, and that's not doing it enough justice. I think this is one of the best offensive lines in the country, and it is why Brendan Sorsby has been able to play as well as he has, because he knows he can stand back there and trust that offensive line. It's why you've got good running backs playing in to some extent, to me, above their talent level. Not a shot at them, just the way they're performing. This offensive line has been really, really impressive this year. I love talking offensive line. If you did not enjoy watching Iowa State Cincinnati this weekend, which were 2 of the top 3 highest rated offensive line performances by PFF, you don't like football, because it was a wonderful thing to see.
No, I'm with you. Nick Cardwell, he's the offensive line coach there. Shout out to him and the job he's done recruiting, but also developing some of these guys. Gavin Gerhardt, he's the center. He's a guy that no one, if you're outside of Cincinnati or like a Big 12 sicko, you're not going to know who that guy is. He's at least a second-year captain. He's been there so long. I talked to him at media days. He is double dipping in terms of he's getting like the new current revenue sharing, but he also gets the back pay from the House settlement because he started in like 2019 or 2020. So he's been around forever. Local guy from Xenia, just right up near Dayton in Ohio, and he's just one like tough and nasty dude. He's exactly what you want out of a center. Great leader. He kind of leads the fight song cheer in the locker room after the game. I know Cincinnati fans appreciate him, but he's just one of these like great college football players. I don't know if he's going to go on to have an NFL career. I certainly hope so, but he is just such a huge piece from a leadership standpoint, being the center and making all the calls. It's kind of, there is no value you could possibly put on this guy who's not going to really amass stats as a center, but he's been huge there in the center, in the middle of the offensive line. We talked about, getting Joe Cotton, kind of recognizing, hey, we might just be one piece short. Let's go out and, maybe spend a little extra than you normally would on this player at this position in the spring transfer portal and bring somebody in that's going to help the team out. And you're right. It is the key to everything that they're doing. It's the key to them running the ball. It's the key to, Brendan Sorsby being able to find some of these new weapons that they have at receiver. And so that to me has unlocked everything that they want to do and what Scott Satterfield wants to do with this offense.
When you look at really successful offenses, you're like, okay, who's that star wide receiver? Who's that stud running back? Who are these just like lights out offensive player? And you're like, look, they have a good receiving core. No one from a statistical standpoint is just like, oh my goodness, this guy is just killing it. Same thing with running back. Like, there's good players at running back. There's good players at wide receiver. Brennan Sorsby is a lowercase g, but still good quarterback in college football. But the offense as a whole is just humming as a unit because of this offensive line. Like that is, if you want to know what the secret sauce here, it's not a Doak Walker Award winner. It's not a Blitnikoff finalist. It's not a top 3 Heisman finalist quarterback. Every single piece on that offense is humming, and it is so much because that offensive line is just absolutely, like, if you want to watch good offensive line play, if you're like, I don't, that's something I pay attention to, turn on a Cincinnati game, y'all, and just watch the offensive line for a little bit. Like, I know it sounds crazy, but like, okay, I don't care what else is going on. I'm just going to watch what these guys do. It is impressive.
Yeah, I know we're only halfway through the season, but I certainly hope they're in the conversation and people have eyes on them for the Moore Award because the way they played to this point, they definitely deserve to be in that group. The wide receivers are interesting. You talked about there's no one that kind of stands out, but this is all offseason. This was the talk about they had to go out and get some difference makers, some more dynamic players at receiver. And the biggest reason was last year teams were just stacking the box against them because they knew they wanted to run the ball. They had Corey Kiner last year, who's now off in the NFL, was a good player. They had Evan Pryor, who's there again, but they just didn't have anyone on the outside that could keep secondaries honest, that could make teams not just have to stick 8 in the box, especially like Iowa State down their 2 corners, that absolutely played a role. But when you have guys who can make plays, Goody, Allen, Caldwell, Jennings, all guys they brought in this offseason, they don't have to be Jeremiah Smith, they don't have to be world beaters, but they can at least keep those defenses honest, have maybe another guy in the secondary have to hang back. That helps open up the run game and everything else they want to do. So it's all kind of working together really well for the Bearcats right now.
It's so hard not to be impressed by, and I feel like some of the things I'm saying is like downplaying other parts of the offense. And it's not to downplay the performance of your running backs, of Evan Pryor, of your wide receivers, of Sorsby. It's just like, that's how good this offensive line is. Like, if you've watched Cincinnati the last few years, like, the offense has been okay. It is so much better this year because that offensive line is just like, when you can trust an offensive line to be like, no, we're good. They're awesome. They got this. It changes everything for you. And so I want to talk about Brennan Sorsby because, look, I've been a Brennan Sorsby fan for a few years now. Like, I still have my stock and I'm not selling it. I really feel like this year they are really able to let him be successful and not force him to try and be more than he is. Because when you put him in spots where it's like, all right, we've seen how many times in the past where Brennan Sorsby makes a play late in the game that's contributes to why that one scored record is what it is. And he hasn't had to do that this year because he can be more comfortable. He can trust his offensive line. I've been sacked once all year. I'm not worried about, I'm going to get hit a couple times. Like, I feel like he is being allowed to be a more successful quarterback because of everything around him. And that is exactly what you want, but he is that comfort level. I think he's really just getting better and better as the season is progressing. And you're really starting to see him thrive, knowing what he has in front of him.
Yeah, I totally agree. At The Athletic, I didn't participate in this article, but we had a couple people do our quarterback tiers going into the season. And Sorsby was high. I think he was 20th, 19th, something like that. Higher than most people probably would have expected. And NFL scouts like him. And honestly, like, I was totally on board with that coming into the season. I was with you. I really liked the talent and the ability he has. And then that Nebraska game, I was kind of just like, man, what happened? I was expecting him, again, not to come out and throw for 400 yards necessarily, but to just come out and look a little bit better. And I don't know what it was that game, if it was something Nebraska did defensively or just that, the team was kind of still gelling. But I think you're right in that he's comfortable for a few reasons. He because they have the offensive line and they have some talent at the skill positions, he doesn't have to feel like I have to hit home run every play. I think that was part of the problem last year. Teams were stacking the box, they couldn't run. So now when he's throwing, he maybe doesn't have the best wide receivers, but he's still trying to make something big play happen every time out. He doesn't have to worry about this. He can let some plays develop as a passer. We haven't even talked about Joe Royer, who could be a first round tight end in the NFL next year. Scored a touchdown against Iowa State. He has these guys he can get to. He knows he can hand the ball off. And, he also has shown the best thing he did in that Nebraska game was run. He can run when he needs to. He really is kind of like just the point guard of this offense in every way. And yeah, it starts with the offensive line and having time. But I also think when you give a player like him confidence, when you talk, there's certain, a lot of times it is quarterbacks, but when you talk to players, you can tell like this guy has a little bit of a moxie, or, if it can seem like overconfident at times if it doesn't pan out on the field. But Sorsby has like a little bit of that. You saw it in the interview he did on TNT with Victor Cruz after the Kansas game, where he's like chiding him for he was a Cowboys fan growing up. And so I think when you give him an opportunity to like let that confidence blossom, that's what you've seen the past 2 weeks. That's what you saw that final drive against Kansas. That's what you saw in the first half, especially against Iowa State. And so it's all those things working together for the offense, and that's kind of just fueling Sorsby to be the confident leader that he's been.
Yeah, like I said, 1 sack this year. He's only thrown 1 pick. It's that one against Nebraska. And as you mentioned, on the ground, third leading rusher right now, 44 carries, 291 yards, and 5 touchdowns, 6.6 yards per carry. I mean, he's been impressive. It's hard not to be excited about what he does moving forward. I want to ask you, Justin, to kind of wraps up a little bit about the Big 12 as you color college football, the Big 12 as a conference, and college football as a whole. Dated Big 12 odds from PFSN pulled on Sunday. Texas Tech, of course, leader in the clubhouse. No shock there with 32.8%. Arizona State's number 2 with 18.8. BYU at 3 with 15.2. Cincinnati at 4 with 10.3. And then Iowa State and Utah at 5th and 6th. Looking at Cincinnati's schedule the rest of the way, it's not the scariest schedule. Now, I don't want to listen. This is the Big 12. This is a conference of chaos. Anything literally can happen. We saw Cincinnati go on the road to Kansas and pull off a come from behind, like just surprise win, right? They've got it. But their road games left on the schedule are Oklahoma State, okay, Utah and TCU. Utah's going to be a tough road game, obviously. You get UCF, you get Baylor, you get Arizona. They've got a BYU at home. But you look at the schedule the rest of the way. Looking at the teams and the odds and everything, it feels like right now it's Texas Tech versus the field. Who's going to be there in Arlington to face them? It would be a very Big 12 title game to be a Cincinnati-Texas Tech game. But if you were going to have to pick today, which is literally what I'm asking you to do, who do you think have the best odds to get there? Whose path do you view? I want to say this before you answer. I'll let you think about this for a second, because I'm big on, I think it's really hard in 16-team conferences for there to be rematches in title games in a conference like the Big 12, because it's so chaotic, because tiebreakers are going to matter so much, because you're not going to have a bunch of teams with 1 loss or no losses at the end of the season. Cincinnati does not play Texas Tech. Cincinnati has already beaten Iowa State and has that tiebreaker. They avoid Arizona State. They do have to play Utah. They do get BYU. The Utah's on the road. BYU's at home. So the schedule does set up for them to say, hey, you can suffer a loss if you choose the right one. But if you win the right games moving forward, there's zero reason to say they can't have the tiebreakers to set them up and send them to Arlington.
Yeah, no, it's all fair. I mean, the thing you mentioned, when you're going through those odds, Texas Tech and Arizona State, those are the top 2 teams. Cincinnati doesn't play either of them, so that's kind of a benefit to them. Arizona State and Texas Tech do meet in a few weeks. I think that'll be a huge game. Based on like the odds you listed, I think people are maybe, have slept a little bit on Utah since that Texas Tech game. Like, whatever you want to say about West Virginia, they blew the doors off West Virginia. I still think Utah's a really tough team. That's kind of the one I'm circling for Cincinnati at Utah. That's going to be a tough game. The one, maybe concern I still have about Cincinnati is like styles make fights. I think there's certain matchups that aren't going to be good for them. TCU, I think, will be a tough matchup because their defense, maybe their secondary, is still one of the concerns that I would have for Cincinnati. TCU, on their best night, can really sling it around. Utah is going to be another tough one because they can kind of match their physicality in the trenches. And I do think Utah still has some, dynamic offense that they can show. And going on the road, that's, you're going across time zones. That's going to be a tough game. But it does feel like, Arizona State, they could potentially lose, or I guess whoever would lose the Texas Tech Arizona State game, you're still kind of in it because neither of those teams has lost a conference game yet. But it feels like if you're Cincinnati, if you can go on the road and beat Utah, then you're really talking like, all right, we still have BYU ahead. We still have on the road at TCU some tough games, but you can really start to feel like you're in that Big 12, conference title discussion. I feel like it's the same way for that Texas Tech Arizona State game. As we stand right now, I don't have BYU scheduled in front of me, so I'm not sure what they have. I know Cincinnati plays them late. Let's see. They have BYU, Iowa State, they have Texas Tech, they have Utah. Like, BYU's got a tough schedule.
the actual schedule is about to start. This is my thing on BYU of like I'm not going to buy in on the 5-0 start just because of the schedule they faced. It's on the road in Arizona, then it's the Holy War, then it's at Iowa State, then it's at Texas Tech, then it's TCU at home, then it's going to be at Cincinnati. Listen, BYU should make a bowl game. I understand the odds. I just don't think they match up with my view of BYU at this point.
And I would agree, but that, again, that's the problem in the Big 12 when you start looking at it. Because if you're just doing the schedule game, which, UCLA just beat Penn State, so who knows what the schedule game. But Cincinnati, they got, Baylor at Utah. They have BYU and then TCU at the end of the year. They got some tough games too. I just feel like if that Utah-Cincinnati game, the winner of that, I feel like is gonna feel, because if Utah loses that, then they're in really tough. That's their second conference loss. But the winner of that's going to come out feeling good, and obviously the winner of the Texas Tech Arizona State's going to come out feeling really good as well.
Going to be look. I don't like to look ahead, but Texas Tech Arizona State. Ooh. Arizona State back-to-back weeks after week off is Utah and Texas Tech.
October 18th for that one.
Oh, is it October? Okay. So I know because Arizona State Utah is this coming weekend.
Oh, I was talking about Texas Tech Arizona State.
Okay.
October 18th.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, the schedule is schedule's fun. All right, Justin, man, it is always an absolute joy and pleasure to get you on the show. Do me a favor, let everybody know where they can cover or check out your work covering college football and the Big 12 and Cincinnati.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, X, whatever you call it, at Williams_Justin. And if you don't subscribe to The Athletic, now's a great time to do it. We're covering all things college football.
Justin, as always, it's a pleasure, man. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate you having me.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by The Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
All right, third segment of the show. As always, welcome my good friend and weekly Picks Pod co-host, Chase A. Kiddy. Talk a little stock up, stock down, and what from the weekend caught his eye. Chase, welcome back, sir.
Hello.
Let's just start this off nice and simple. Same way we like to. What outcome this weekend, there were a lot of interesting ones, had the biggest impact on your view of that team or the conference as a whole?
Yes. This is easily the most fun week to have this discussion. And this is what you want, finally, to get to conference play where you have really interesting results so that you can have these kinds of discussions. I went with Colorado. And
Ooh.
I think there's a lot of totally defensible answers for this question this week. But Colorado, to me, to go on the road, the score says that TCU covered and won 35-21, covered the 13.5. I don't even want to talk about that one right now. As somebody that had plus 13.5 on the Picks Pod. If you didn't watch this game, this was 21-21 with TCU punting the ball back to Colorado with 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. It was a very heavily contested game, and I'm saying that as somebody that had TCU in College Football Survivor. So, very tight game. The second round of Salter starts here for Colorado. Feels like maybe it's going in the right direction. I was impressed by how Colorado's run defense really contained TCU on the ground. So to me, I feel like I got more out of Colorado playing up to TCU and really making the case that, hey, we're a crafty, middle-class Big 12 team right now. We don't suck. I think I learned more from that than, say, Cincinnati beating Iowa State, where you and I talked all last week about the fact that Cincinnati was favored and we weren't going to be surprised if they won. I talked last Sunday night about how Cincinnati I was already adjusting them in my power rankings. I was already sliding them up. So I was surprised in the way that Cincinnati dominated Iowa State, especially in the first half of that game. But I wasn't surprised about the outcome. I think UCF was a contender here as well. They were more competitive against Kansas than I expected. And that kind of led me to reevaluate Kansas more than UCF. I am interested to see what UCF does the next couple weeks because an adjustment might be coming there as well for me. But right now I took that more as, okay, Kansas maybe the West Virginia game was the high water mark for Kansas. And, if only every team could play West Virginia every week, they would look fantastic, right? But I think Kansas maybe is closer to, I think what I said in the column today was, if you're trying to peg where Kansas is after the last few weeks, yes, they have the high water mark against West Virginia. They have sort of a lower mark, maybe against Cincinnati or against UCF or against a Missouri team that turns out is quite good. But if you're trying to peg where they are, they're probably closer to Colorado than Texas Tech at this point. And that maybe starts to fill out what this middle 20% of the Big 12 looks like.
I think that's fair. Look, it again, for Kansas to win, it took 3 straight goal line stands, and then it took another turnover on downs at their own 22 to escape with a win against UCF. And so, look, they blew a game against Cincinnati, and Cincinnati looks pretty good. They lost again to Missouri, who's pretty good. So, at this point, Kansas doesn't have a loss on their resume that you go. All they have are 2 quality losses, which in the SEC means you're a top 10 team,
playoff contender,
right? But they don't have the easiest. Look, Kansas is going to go to a bowl game.
Sure,
I'm gonna say this nicely. This might be, if they don't break the sunflower streak this year, it will never happen. They get OSU at home. They go to Arizona. That could be it. That feels like a toss-up game. So they're going to get 2 more wins if they need to go to a bowl game. Colorado, I think it's one of those things where they're better than we thought they were. That doesn't necessarily mean that I think they're really good. I just think they're more
not really good and not good.
Yeah,
but
there's a difference between they're not OSU bad.
Exactly. They're a real team.
Not. Yeah, they're a real college football team that you're going to have to compete with. There's a very interesting matchup of them hosting Iowa State coming up this weekend. I'm going to pick Iowa State to win that game, but there's a chance that Colorado is at least interesting.
Think about it.
Okay.
Did you watch that secondary at Cincinnati?
I think they made a bad call, and then they adjusted, and the secondary worked better, and hopefully they'll, with another week of practice, kind of get some things wrong. We'll see. No, I think those are all fair points. I do want to talk to you about BYU, as they are ranked in the top 25, undefeated at 5-0, and I remain skeptical. Sometimes teams, look, you have to beat the teams that are on your schedule, and they have done that so far. Thought East Carolina was a trap game. They won it. Beat West Virginia. No, everyone's beating West Virginia these days except for Pitt. Not as comfortably as I thought they might.
Welcome to the team.
I sit here with 5-0 West BYU and just kind of go yeah, but they haven't beaten anyone. Now look, they've got a better resume and argument than Texas and Penn State to those top 20 AP poll voters who still voted Texas and Penn State. Looking at you voters who still put them in the top 20, 2 teams that have not beaten a Power 4 opponent yet. Meanwhile, BYU has 3 wins over Power 4 opponents. But I just don't trust this 5-0 BYU team. Am I not giving them enough credit, do you think, or are you with me in this?
Let me take a measured approach here.
I don't think BYU is bad. Let me put it this way: they're going to a bowl game.
Nobody thinks
they're going to keep winning games. They're going to keep winning games. If you told me they finished the year 9-3, great. When you start getting teams that are 5-0, people start having expectations for them, and I'm like, I think that the schedule has worked out for them to start 5-0. They're going to lose games. I know they have the 3rd best odds for the Big 12 title game according to PFSN. I don't think they should be that high, because they've got to They've got Utah, they've got Iowa State, they've got Texas Tech, they've got Cincinnati on the schedule. Like, this team's going to take losses, and they could go anywhere from 7-5 to 9-3, and I wouldn't be super shocked, but like, I'm not picking this team to go 10-2 the rest for the year. I just think it's a 5-0 because of the schedule more than it is this is a team that we really need to start taking seriously as a Big 12 title.
Yeah, I mean, if the question is how seriously do I take them as a Big 12 title contender, then no, I don't think they're on that list. And I mean, you mentioned the schedule. Let's really draw it out here, right? Because they are currently at the apex, I think, of what their power is going to be this season, right now, today. Because starting next weekend, it's at Arizona, arch rivalry game against Utah. That game is in Provo. At Iowa State, at Texas Tech, home for TCU, at Cincinnati, Senior Day UCF. There are legitimately, I mean, there's a chance that this team, which is currently 5-0, finishes the season 6-6 or 7-5. Right? And that is not a knock on BYU. It's a function of how difficult the back end of that schedule is. So, yes. I mean, I think the fun thing you would say is, hey, we're going to know. We're going to know real soon. They are going to have the chance to make you eat the words, or they're going to have a chance to find their level. But the schedule is tough, and that's why I think they're handicapped incorrectly in the futures market right now, because they're in the same group right now with Cincinnati. They're priced very similarly. In some books, they're priced exactly the same. And I don't know how you could look at Cincinnati's schedule and then look at BYU's schedule and say, oh, yeah, those two teams have an equal shot to play in the conference title.
And look, there's a week off between the Iowa State and Texas Tech road games. But I still feel comfortable saying that the Texas Tech road game is on November 8th. I feel comfortable, given the next three at Arizona, home for Utah, and at Iowa State, that by the end of October, we will know where BYU stands. And I know that the Big 12 is wacky and crazy and chaotic, and just surprising things happen every day. And having 2 losses in conference play, having 3 losses in conference play may not keep you out of Arlington. Tiebreakers are tiebreakers. But I feel confident in saying that by the end of October, we're going to know who and what BYU is and what we should expect for them moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, let me say this about what they've done so far. You talked about the East Carolina game that we both kind of thought looked a little trappy. No doubter, right? Went all the way to the East Coast in swampy North Carolina in a climate that I'm sure they don't have in Utah, because that's pretty close to me. No doubter, right? That Colorado game, if you didn't watch it, Colorado jumped all over them early. They had an early, I think, 14-point lead. Really gutsy to come back in that game and get the road win at a Colorado team that, again, I think is kind of scrappy and maybe better than the public perception would indicate. So it's not that they're bad. It's that the schedule is tough and the losses are good.
Yeah, that's fair. Any other takeaways you wanna touch on?
You know, I caught the end of your conversation with Justin, and you are basically, from a mathematical standpoint, you guys were right to frame the Texas Tech part as we are reaching the point where it's Texas Tech or the field. That's certainly what the math says right now, and the implied probabilities underneath of the odds. We're probably about a week away from you actually having to lay a minus number if you want to bet Texas Tech to win the conference. And I think we probably agree that from what we've seen, like that's correct. That's not an overreaction. They do look like the class of the conference and a threat to make the playoff, win playoff games, and I think really acquit the Big 12 well this year.
Yeah, look, they play Kansas this week, then they go to Arizona State. After that Arizona State game, if they win both of those and are undefeated, it is Texas Tech versus the field. Period. End of story. Even if they were to suffer a loss the rest of the way, like it's not gonna. Again, I don't think we're gonna get rematches. I think you're gonna have 2 teams who didn't face each other in the regular season because of having 16 teams and the chaos of this conference and tiebreakers being weird and wild. If Texas Tech in 2 weeks is sitting here at 7-0, then it's Texas Tech versus the field. Even if they take on a loss somewhere, to, I don't know, at Kansas State or home for BYU. That's best I can.
How
do.
dare you laugh?
Like,
I know what you were looking at.
Yeah, the Oklahoma State game on. Look, it's Texas Tech versus the field, and it's going to be interesting down the stretch to see what the field does. Because I do think it is. If it's Texas Tech versus the field, maybe we do get Utah back in there. I just have a hard time with that one. So I think it's between Arizona State, Cincinnati, Iowa State, and Utah. And I'm not going to include BYU, and I'm sorry if if that upsets you. I understand, but I don't see anybody else there. I mean, I think we're pretty comfortable saying there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams in the contention here, 5 true teams in contention here, and that's it.
You know what's fun? I guess maybe I'll leave it at this, and then you can wrap the show with your Week 7 stuff. Last year, we had a team get picked dead last in a 16-team conference, win the conference. Every possible bad thing that could have happened to harm the perception of the Big 12 as a conference happened down the stretch. This year, can you have a more polar opposite outcome than what happened last year, than a modern NIL-built Texas Tech preseason hype team that completely lives up to the hype, goes on a potential 13-0 juggernaut run to the college football playoff and gets a high seed? Are there any more opposite outcomes than those two things?
But it's also the most Big 12 thing. It's the most Big 12 thing. Hey, I wish we'd have had a preseason poll so Texas Tech could have been number 1 this year, and then Texas Tech could have won it all. And we go, hey, remember how the whole preseason polls are just preseason polls, and not having one because 16th won it was a dumb thing to reason to not have one anymore.
I get what they were trying to do with that. I get that they were trying to fight a PR battle, and so they were trying to not shoot themselves in the foot, but that felt so reactionary and stupid.
Mental gymnastics, and they just won a gold in it. And congratulations. And that's not a good gold. Chase, as always, it's a pleasure. We'll get you back here for picks on Thursday. I tell you who the guest is going to be, but I don't know yet, so we'll get to that when we record Wednesday night.
All right. See you Wednesday.
We wrap the show up the same way every week. We look to the weekend that is coming up. 2 teams off this week, Baylor and West Virginia. Baylor are going to get to have a week to enjoy that win. West Virginia, a week to lick their wounds. 7 games on Saturday. No weeknight games for the Big 12 this week. Everything on Saturday. Things kick off in the morning. Oklahoma State hosting Houston on TNT. Cincinnati versus UCF on FS1, as I've told you. Watch the TNT games. Put them on. Mike Golick Jr., fantastic. Out of the force. Great on the sideline. The pregame show has been phenomenal. So if you listen, it's an 11 a.m. kickoff, which means they'll have their pregame show on from 10 to 11. So if you are like me and don't really want to watch the ESPN or Fox stuff or don't have time, I'll be at soccer with my children. But watch that game, or at least put it on. Cincinnati versus UCF on FS1 at 11 a.m. For the afternoon, we get Colorado hosting Iowa State on ESPN. Battle of the Purple Animals, Kansas State hosting TCU on Fox. And then in the prime time, 2 games as well. Undefeated Texas Tech welcomes Kansas to Lubbock on Fox. Love all this Fox big channel, Big 12 stuff. And Arizona versus BYU on ESPN2. It's a little sad that one got stuck to ESPN2 because I do think it's an interesting game. And Big 12 After Dark is back with a doozy of a matchup. I don't know how this is on Big 12 After Dark, but Utah is hosting Arizona State on ESPN. Yes. That is a stay up late for. That is an absolutely. That is going to do some numbers. Utah, Arizona State, 9:15 p.m. God's time kickoff on ESPN. That game's going to do some numbers, especially if it is as entertaining as I think it might be. So that's your slate for this upcoming weekend. A lot of great games. Make sure the TNT game is on a channel somewhere, okay? We want TNT to continue to invest in the Big 12 Conference. They're doing a phenomenal job with their broadcasts. It's the best Big 12 broadcast that anyone puts on. It is so good. We want more. I don't care about the caliber of the games. Just put it on TV and leave it on somewhere, okay? Leave it on, okay? But there's games on morning, afternoon, night, and at dark. Enjoy your Big 12 football. I know I will. Like I said, we'll be back on Thursday to make picks. Looking forward to it as always. Y'all, have a good week, and we'll talk to you then.
podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.